More people today than ever before are self-identifying as non-religious. This has taken many forms. There are those who try to remain skeptical but open-minded, such as agnostics. There are those who vehemently denounce religion, such as atheists. And there are perhaps even greater number of people than both of these groups today who claim to be spiritual yet non-religious, meaning they believe that there is more to this world than merely a material plane, but we humans have no current understanding of it, or may never have an understanding of it. All of these subsections of the term non-religious have been given the traditions and beliefs of our ancestors and found them wanting. How does all this relate to Final Fantasy X, you might be asking? Well, Final Fantasy X is a story that provokes discussions about the nature of faith, organized religion, perceived heresy, and the possibility of spiritual growth and renewal. And I wanted to take the time today to explain some of these themes and what we can take away from them, if any, from this game that has proven to be among the most popular of the franchise. First off, Final Fantasy X is the story of a young and yet cocky star athlete named Titus, who is living in the larger-than-life metropolis called Zanarkand. But when his city is attacked by a large, otherworldly monster, Titus is transported through time to the future, to a land called Spira. This later proves not to be the case, but for much of the story, this is Titus and the rest of the cast's impression of what has transpired. Titus comes to find that the future has become a wreck of a place, with most of the people of Spira living in small huts and tents, stark contrast to the major city he had grown up in. Spira is terrorized constantly by that same monster that attacked Zanarkand and transported him to this place. The people of Spira have come to name this monster Sin, as they have been led to believe by a church that call themselves the Yevonites that the monster exists to punish the people for all their past evils. This same church teaches the people that once they have atoned for these past sins, through the teachings of Yevon, that sin itself will disappear from the world for good. Titus then joins a group of people who have taken it upon themselves to defeat sin, to bring about the calm, a period of time where the people of Spira can live without fear. This group is led by what is called a summoner, something of a priestess of Yevon, and her followers that are dubbed guardians, people who have sworn to protect the summoner to the very end. And this is where the main story truly begins. The group travel throughout Spira from town to town, praying to the spirits of the local temples called Aeons in order to gain their power in order to help the summoner defeat sin. The game itself is widely praised by critics and gamers alike, not just for its in-depth story and characters, but for its groundbreaking graphics, art design, and excellent turn-based gameplay. This is a beautiful game, and if you get the chance to play the remastered version, I highly recommend it. Now, to understand the Final Fantasy X's main takes on religion and faith, I think it would be best to dissect the character of Wakka. Wakka is the most religious character of the main cast of Final Fantasy X. It's also interesting to note that Wakka is also the most athletic member of the cast and serves as the captain for his blitzball team, the Besaid Aurochs. This parallel of religiosity, athleticism, and team leadership is well portrayed and accurately reflects reality, as athletes, especially those that play on team sports, tend to be more religious than non-athletes. The reasons for this disparity is not entirely clear, but I believe it has much to do with the fact that in order to be a professional athlete, a person needs to have an abnormally high level of self-discipline. And religious people tend to display a much more rigid moral code, thus demonstrating their high levels of self-discipline. Also, to be a professional athlete, one has to be able to face failure on a regular basis. It could be emotionally and physically draining to put your entire mind, body, and soul into an endeavor just to come up short because someone was simply better than you. If there is a God, then there is a grand cosmic plan for everything. And that means God did not want me to succeed in this challenge because he wants something different for me. Religion can be a way for those who fail to better come to terms with that failure. For these reasons, we can see why Wakka would appear so devout in his religion. He prays at every temple he goes to. He gives thanks to Yevon whenever someone appears to go well for him or his friends. He debates with religious authorities in the church about the true meaning of Holy Scripture. And perhaps most unflatteringly, He openly shows hostility and hatred for those he sees as non-believers or heretics. Now, this interaction with the character Riku is very important, but more on that later. Because of Wakka's devotion to his faith, he serves as an integral look at what can happen to a person when their faith gets challenged. It shows how a person can become more stubborn and combative when their most fundamental values to their core of who they are get challenged. In short, people hate change. Yet, having your most fundamental beliefs challenged is a healthy part of personal growth. If I never had any of my values or beliefs challenged, ever, then I'd still believe I could be a Super Saiyan if I tried hard enough. I'm this close, guys. I can feel it. Wakka's fundamentalist faith is most heavily demonstrated in his hatred for the race of people called the Al-Bhed, to which Riku is one. In the game, the Al-Bhed are portrayed as being the heretics of Spira, the non-followers of Yevon who use forbidden technology. The Al-Bhed are shown as being more rational and scientific than the Yevonites. At a point during the game, the main cast reach a place called the Far Plane, something of a mystical holy land where the spirits travel to after they've died. Riku is quick to deny the mysticism of such place.
You're not really going to see the dead, more like your memories of them. People think of their relatives and the Fireflies react to them. They take on the form of the dead person, an illusion, nothing else.
The Al-Bhed's willingness to use forbidden technology and their dismissal of the more mystical elements of the Yevonites' religion clearly comes in direct conflict with Wakka's more fundamental beliefs. But his hatred of Al-Bhed proves to be merely a learned behavior and has nothing to do with any sort of actual conflict between the Al-Bhed way of life and his own. For the first portion of the game, after Riku joins the party, Wakka never even realizes this very simple fact that she is one of the people he claims to hate so very much for just cause. He realizes how foolish he was for this. Although, not at first. His prejudice for Al-Bhed is shown to be even more ridiculous when he later finds out that Yuna, the girl he sees as a kid sister and the very person he pledged his life to protect, is half Al-Bhed herself. It is perhaps through Riku, Cid, and the other Al-Bhed characters that many people perhaps draw the wrong conclusions Final Fantasy X has to say about the subject of religion. After all, by the end of the game, the Al-Bhed are the good guys, and most of the maesters of Yevon have revealed themselves to be infidels. And if you're playing the remastered version, anytime you try to revisit one of these original temples, you're met with incredible hostile temple priests. But still, my takeaway differs perhaps from many others for what could really just be my own personal bias trying to dig up a meaning where there really isn't. But still, I don't think the original writers and producers of Final Fantasy X would have put this scene in if it didn't have any significance.
Fredajo, Wicho. E-A-U-E.
Nobo Meno. Ren Mili. Yochu Yoko. Asate Kanae. Kutamae.
From the beginning of the story, we're told explicitly by all the main cast of characters that the Al-Bhed are heathens or infidels for putting more faith in science and technology than Yevon's teachings. And yet, despite all these differences and judgments, when the chips are truly down, the Al-Bhed all begin to sing the hymn of the faith. Now, to deny that this act has more spiritual significance is just foolish. Are they merely singing this song because it is a very pleasing one, or do they sing it because it has a link that connects everyone throughout time and space, that joins them in something much greater than themselves? It is an adherence to tradition, not a complete dismissal of it. Perhaps what bothers me most about the modern-day atheist movement is not their arrogance or petty critiques of superstitions and equating religion with that of the lowly snake oil salesman. No. I think what bothers me most about the modern atheist movement is that it is truly an anti-theist movement rather than an atheist movement. They have this unwavering belief that if we just do away with all religion and religious symbolism in our society, then we would truly be able to usher in an age of utopia. And not to get too far into the reeds, but anyone promising utopia on Earth is either a liar or a tyrant in the making. Nevertheless, perhaps I will let Neil deGrasse Tyson explain what I mean when I discuss atheists' desire to rid religion. The Al-Beds sang the hymn of the faith not because it sounded good, but it is them understanding their place in the grand scheme of history, that there is something that transcends themselves. To take real-world examples, remember when Notre Dame burned down? Do you remember the response that was elicited? For many prominent public figures, the entire focus was on the tragedy of a loss of beauty in architecture. Now, no doubt, as someone who has been to one of these Gothic cathedrals here in the Western Hemisphere, there is no denying the massive beauty these buildings do hold. But why? Why does some art transcend while other art leaves us bored or unfulfilled? And in the case of Notre Dame, it's because of its history. And not just its history, but it's specifically its religious history. That makes it a much more historic loss than, say, the loss of Big Ben in London or the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Notre Dame was a symbol of Western civilization and its history. That's in order to build something so truly beautiful, immense higher meaning must have been felt by not only the architect, but the workers who built it over the course of a century. How could a single construction project last for multiple generations if there wasn't something truly awe-inspiring lying behind the minds and hearts of all those people who made it possible? Hell, we can't go a single election cycle without the new administration undoing everything his predecessor did, let alone centuries of collaboration. This is what is being felt by these characters in the bridge of Sid's airship. A connection throughout time that transcends basic needs and biology towards something resembling meaning in what otherwise seems like a meaningless universe. What if there is no plan for spirit and sin other than the cycles of needless destruction and periods of calm? Sin in this case represents that very human cycle of trying to balance chaos with order. That without any higher meaning, we will just needlessly cycle through one extreme to the next. Most religions have this balance of chaos and order, building and destroying, from the Taoist concept of yin and yang to the Hindu gods of Shiva and Vishnu. And yes, even Christianity has some passages about creating order in a chaotic world. I suppose there is just those in our world that believe change for its own sake is a virtue, whereas others might say that change is never good. Why fix what ain't broke, right? Truthfully, the real answer for me lies somewhere in the middle, as most things do. Knowing what traditions need to remain and what traditions need to be changed, and having the wisdom to know the difference and why. For me, that's exactly what is being told in this story. On its surface, Final Fantasy X is about the relationship between a son and his father, his hatred for him and everything he represents. But more than that, it's about taking up the mantle of leadership. To take what was given to you by the sacrifices of your ancestors and build something better on top of it. It is not a story of petty resentment for the past, but understanding of the past, understanding its impact, and understanding that things were done with reason, even when it's not clear to us in the present why. Well, that's it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video lecture. I hope to do more like them in the future when I'm not able to arrange a podcast with Tina or have a guest host or interview. And please hit the like button and subscribe. This has been Tina and Karen Do the Tube. I am Karen. Adios to you all.